Hi friends, I have a sweet project for you featuring Spellbinder's 3D Emboss and Cut Floral For You embossing folder. This is really awesome. One folder doing two jobs, embossing and cutting to produce two card fronts and a tag. So here is the folder, and it's quite large, as you can see. The dies are separate, but they fit into channels around each of the images. It is easy to figure out which side of the folder to place them because they will sit securely. I'll be cutting my images from Bristol smooth cardstock because I'm going to be doing some watercoloring. My die cutter, I had to work pretty hard to roll it through, so I would recommend that if you have the same problem, that you cut down your paper and do one image at a time. I did test this out and it rolled through on my machine just fine. I'll be painting with pigment powders. I'm using a combination of Nouveau Shimmer powders and Lindy's Magical Shakers. The powders that I'm working with are placed on an acrylic plate. I just add in water with my paintbrush. For the centers of all of the flowers, I'll be using Nouveau Solar Flare, a nice bright crisp yellow. The leaves and the stems will be colored with Nouveau's Green Parade. This is a really lovely shade of green. All of the painting is being done with my favorite brush, Kazan Round number 8. I control the amount of color that is being applied through pressure. When painting a larger area, I'll press a little bit more on my paintbrush, but when I'm working on those fine lines for the stems, I have the lightest of touch. And this does take practice. But honestly, does it matter? It's watercolor. And so if some spills out into the background, who cares? It looks lovely. Just on the largest of the 3 image panels, there is a giant peony. For this one, I'm going to be using Lindy's Pass the Jam Jane. These names, right? They're just hilarious. Painting an embossed image is just so easy. You literally just have to paint it. All of the crevices will collect the paint, creating darker areas for shadow. And using the pigment powders is actually a really good choice for this technique because they are so highly pigmented. And at the very end, when all of the painting is done on all 3 projects, I'll use a little trick to add in some nice highlight areas. There are butterflies on all 3 panels, and they're going to be painted in the exact same way. At the base of each of the wings, I'll be applying Nouveau's Falling Leaves. This is a bright spring green. And then I'll go back to Solar Flare, that was the yellow that was used in the center of the flowers, and finish the wingtips off. When the painting is complete on all 3 panels, then I'll be attending to the details, which will include the butterfly's body and antennae. Good grief, I just noticed that one of the butterflies was done in pink. This is just on the large panel. It's the same pink that I'm going to be using for the small flowers, which we're getting to next. I do have a preference for the green and yellow ones, though I just think they pop off the panel. The flower buds are being colored with Lindy's Pinkies Up Pink. For all of the small flowers, I'll start off with a base coat of Lindy's Crumpet Crumbs. This is a cream color with peach undertones. And while the paint is still wet, I'll go back to the Pinkies Up Pink and drop that color in at the base of each of the flower petals. All 3 panels have an embossed border. I will be painting those, but I'm going to wait till the very end. White pigment ink is going to be applied to the images to provide highlights. And I don't want those highlights on the border. The tag has an embossed sentiment. I'm going to use a gold gel pen and just trace over the letter so that it stands out. And I'll be using my favorite black gel pen by Uniball to color in the butterflies' bodies and to trace over the antennae. These little finishing touches make such a big difference. And back for the final stretch of painting. I'm going to be painting that raised border with green parade. That is the bright green that was used on some of the butterflies. Most of the butterflies, except the pink one, of course, which I forgot about. When painting these borders, my pressure on the paintbrush is fairly light. This light pressure gives me more control so that I can keep that paint on the embossed area and also keep the lines fairly straight and even looking. Having said that, they're not perfect by a long shot. It still looks pretty and it doesn't have to be perfect. And with all the coloring complete, I'm going to line up this trio in my spatter box and apply with a fan brush some white gouache that has been watered down ever so slightly so that it is looser to apply spatter. These panels are going to be used to create, yes, a gift tag, but the other two will be used for an A2 size and the other a note card sized shape card. The shape cards will be created with arch labels and tags die set. To create these shaped card bases, the dies are placed on white cardstock that has been folded in half. The arch of the die overhangs the crease line. Where the front is attached to the back of the card base will cause it to be misshapen. The same dies were used to cut another piece of white cardstock, and this is adhered to the front of the card base. These die cuts will first be embossed with a pretty folder called Meandering Floral. Because the dies are not attached to the embossing folder, they can also be used separately. I'm going to cut white sheet foam and mount the panels on them. Sentiments for the two cards are from Everyday Sentiments. They have been die cut from both white cardstock and sheet foam. I don't remove the excess foam until the die cuts have been stacked. I'll wait for the adhesive to dry completely so that they don't shift out of alignment, and in the meantime I'll start assembling the cards. The embossed panel is adhered to the shaped card base. The Floral For You panels are adhered to the foam die cuts, and then they're mounted onto the card base. The tag was adhered to a white cardstock die cut and then embroidery thread used to create the tie. That's a wrap on this project featuring Spellbinders 3D Emboss Cut Folder Floral For You. I hope you enjoyed this video tutorial as much as I loved making these cards and that sweet tag. Thank you so much for stopping by, and as always, I appreciate your visit.